No, thanks very much, and thanks for your time in coming in such numbers. I suppose I'd like to ask the simplest question first, and what do you envisage being the biggest challenges in delivering this rapid transformation? Be interested to hear your insight. Is it, behavioural issues, people understanding and acting differently? Is it, developing technologies? Is it, market interventions, pricing, whatever? What are the biggest challenges, and how might that guide us? And the other thing that's coming, I suppose, very hot foot up after we agree overall budgets is this issue of the balance across sectors, and how you make trade-offs between adjustments that might be perceived as difficult in one sector versus those in other sectors. Again, just interested to see what insights you have from having scanned all the sectors together, how you would guide, if you like, the political people in balancing those sort of trade-offs that clearly exist. I know you've given us bands, but within the bands, there seems to be a big difference, for example, in agriculture between a 30% reduction and a 22% reduction. They imply very different sort of impacts potentially. So those are, very basic questions. And maybe you'd also shed light on, we've now brought in land use, which hadn't been there before. And, obviously we have to deliver 51% in that additional arena. Do we have the policy tools around, or have they been worked up to the same degree as in the other areas? There'd be a few questions for our witnesses. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, and I should say I am in the Leinster House.
Thanks for that, Deputy Bruton. Professor O'Gallagher, you didn't specify Deputy Bruton. Were they for any specific witnesses?
No, well, I'd say Professor O'Gallagher knows better than I who's best placed. Okay, Professor O'Gallagher.
Thank you, and I'm happy to field questions, as you suggested, Chair, in terms of, and I'll be drawing on in this instance, in terms of the challenges on the energy side, Dr. Hannah Daly. On agriculture, I'll leave it up to Kevin or Trevor who'd like to come in, and I'll ask David Stiles on the land use question. But just firstly, maybe just to talk about the process we undertook, because we did explore different levels of, I suppose, the impact of different trajectories on different sectors. Now, our obligation didn't extend, as you will know, to the sectoral emission ceilings, which is a follow-on task to the task of agreeing the carbon budgets. But in terms of informing the impacts, we did undertake and explore the analysis. And you're right in the sense of just on the balance question, that different sectors have different challenges and different opportunities. And it's very clear, and this links into the first part of your question, it's very clear from the analysis that we undertook that to achieve the 51% target that the Oireachtas has already agreed very strongly, it will require transformations across all sectors of society. It's very much a full and complete transformation. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that 51% ambition over a decade is the second highest ambition in the world in terms of climate action. So the Oireachtas is to be commended for that ambition. But clearly that brings challenges, and it brings challenges across all sectors of society. In terms of some of the topics you mentioned about where there are challenges, behavioural, market, technological and policy, again, it's system-wide. We're talking about a complete transformation. And it's clear from the graph, if you look at the difference in the two trajectories in what's in figure 2, you can see the difference between what's in the current kind of policy mix, if you like, and what's required in terms of this additional step change to achieve the carbon budgets required. And in terms of the implications of the 51% reduction on land use, the timing of this did challenge us because the clarity came late in the committee deliberations and proceedings. But we were fortunate to have David's input from fairly much an early stage in the committee proceedings, so we did get a good sense of the land use implications. And I think well, I'll leave it there, and I might ask maybe Dr. Hannah Daly first to talk about her sense of the challenges on the energy side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Deputy Bruton, for the question. To introduce myself, my name is Dr. Hannah Daly, and I'm a lecturer in Sustainable Energy Systems Modelling in UCC. And for this Carbon Budget Committee process, I led the analysis of the implications of different carbon budgets on the energy system, so varying levels of decarbonisation for the energy system between 51 to 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and the implications of alternative technology pathways or demand reduction pathways. So when you ask Deputy Bruton what's the biggest challenge in delivering rapid transformation, it's first important to acknowledge that the energy system underpins everything that we do. And right now, around 88% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. Fossil fuels being the overall source of CO2 emissions that need to fall. So that 88% needs to fall to below 50% by 2030 to meet any of these targets. So we need a relentless, rapid shift away from consuming fossil fuels. And I think it's very important to move the narrative and the discourse away from certain technology targets. You know, we meet let's say minimum renewable electricity target or a minimum electric vehicle target, to rapid reductions in the consumption of fossil fuel immediately. And that is what the carbon budget kind of framework requires. If I'll give you an example, while electric car sales doubled last year, 4,000 extra EVs were sold last year compared to the previous year, SUV sales grew by 11,000, so nearly 3 times the additional electric car sales. So those SUVs entering the fleet, which are much less efficient and have a much bigger carbon footprint. So I think that the focus needs to move away from meeting certain technology targets towards a relentless, immediate focus on reducing fossil fuel consumption. And because it permeates all sort of aspects of society, there's no single solution. As Professor O'Gallagher described, it is about societal, economic and political transformations that can achieve that. A few things that I would draw your attention to that are really critical in this transformation. I think it will be a surprise to nobody that renewable electricity is an absolute cornerstone of meeting the decarbonisation targets. And that is not because electricity is a very big source of emissions, it's mainly heat and transport, but because the electricity system is needed to decarbonise the rest of the system. So if we don't meet our targets to rapidly reduce to rapidly roll out renewables, mainly offshore wind and solar, then all of these targets will be at risk. But we need to move on beyond renewable electricity at the same time to new solutions. And the analysis that we did, which included a low energy demand scenario and a more, let's say, progressive technology solution scenario, indicates we need to look at solutions like lowering energy demand where possible, carbon capture and storage, bioenergy, and novel gases as quickly as possible. So when you ask about the balance across sectors, how to assess those trade-offs, we can provide insights into what different pathways are possible in the energy system in terms of how quickly the energy system can decarbonise, at what cost, what technologies and demand reductions are required. But we can't make that judgment as to what is the best, because it becomes a question of how quickly people are accepting of a change in their demands and how quickly they can take up new technology solutions. So I'll say that the question about what is the appropriate balance across sectors, it's really a question for policy to decide. I will leave the question on land use to my colleagues. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Daly. Is it Dr. Hanrahan, I think,
Yes.
for the land use question? Yeah.
Well, for agriculture first, maybe.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Dr. Kevin Hanrahan, and I'm the head of the Rural Economy Development Programme in Teagasc and an economist working on this area. Like Dr. Daly, I don't think it's really our remit to make that sort of that cutting the calf in half or the child in half judgment about where the fairness of the sectoral balance lies. But the work we did as part of the Carbon Budget Committee during 2021 looked at lots of different pathways, as Dr. Daly was talking about, for the energy system. We did the same or equivalent for the agriculture sector, looking at different reduction endpoints and pathways to those endpoints for agriculture, and then looked at what the set of actions identified in the Teagasc marginal abatement cost curve analysis would allow the sector to achieve in terms of reduction efforts. And it was clear from that analysis that the lower end of the range that has been chosen by the political system for agriculture could be feasible without very large changes in activity levels. But when you get to the upper end of that range, or beyond that upper end of the range of 30%, you do need, given the current set of technologies we have to hand and those likely to come on stream over that period, you would need to see changes in activity levels. And the analysis we did as part of our work for the committee, that's in the technical note of the Carbon Budgets Committee, sets out some of the economic consequences for the agricultural sector and for the food processing sector and employment in those sectors and in the wider economy of different scenarios that we considered, from a 20% reduction target all the way towards 51% pro rata allocation for the ag sector. The last thing I'll say in response to your question, Deputy Bruton, is regards to the land use, and our colleague Dr. David Stiles from UL will talk about the forestry contribution. We also did some work on the land use, again based on work that's going on in Teagasc. And there, of course, there is opportunities for re-wetting of carbon-rich soils in particular that could actually deliver a lot of mitigation, but nothing on the order of 51%. And I think that an awful lot more activity level change would be required to meet that particular reduction target by 2030. And I'll leave it at that for the moment.